Hi, everyone. It's a beautiful day here where I am, and I hope wherever you are that it's a beautiful day as well. I want to start by just thanking Kelly O'Tillery for inviting me. And if it wasn't for her enthusiasm to have me come and speak, I wouldn't be here. And also, I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Donna, who handled all of the technical stuff and put up with my sort of Neanderthal um, functioning in the technological world. As I've been in astrology for a long time, and as I was thinking of all of the different experiences that I've been through, I think there's, oh God, probably a dozen or so that just stand out as emblematic of where we are as a community today. Now, I was at a conference, no, not a, it was a workshop. Gary Kristen was giving in St. Petersburg, where Shara is living now. And he was going on for 3 or 4 days, and we were having a great time. There were people from, all around, but there was a hurricane coming in, which, as you all know, we have a lot of in Florida. And I was under orders from my spiritual master, Meher Baba, to not leave my home during a natural disaster. So I checked out of the motel I was in, and I jumped in the car, and I'm getting ready to drive through, which is like tremendous hurricane force winds back to Naples. Now, just as I was getting ready to leave, David Beasley comes running out. David Beasley is a Uranian astrologer, and this was a Uranian event. And he and I have been friends for a really long time. And he had a map of Florida. And he held it up and he says, "Bob, you don't have to worry. This hurricane is going to miss Naples. It's going to go just south of Naples." And he had it all figured out with all of the planets laid out over the map. And he says, it will probably hit Marco Island. And I drove down and I got home, and sure enough, the hurricane, we had wind and rain and all this, but the hurricane itself did hit on Marco Island, which was 50 miles south of Naples. Well, I'm telling you this because he was doing something that I wouldn't have conceived of being able to do, which was to predict the path of a hurricane using astrology and using, all of the Uranian techniques. Why this is important to us today is that it is an active ingredient in Mother Astrology's frame of reference, is that we learn tolerance, open-mindedness, an ability to grasp the results of things that we do not understand. And everybody in this room, I know all of you you've had examples of this in your own life, where there's been some astrologer who will do something that seems magical. And if you're, cynical, and it's some of my teachers have been, said, "Oh, that person wasn't using astrology, they were psychic." Well, if you go that route, you don't learn anything. And so I'm saying to you, it is important to be open-minded to the idea that there are astrologers who can do things that you may not understand or are not capable of doing. My focus has been very narrow in recent years of helping people just improve their lives, improve their consciousness. Now, that may sound like, oh yes, all astrologers do that. Well, some people, come to an astrologer and their idea of self-improvement is to get a better job, or to have a bigger car, or to get with their girlfriend or boyfriend, any number of different things, or to make more money, which is all legitimate. As an astrologer who's been in the field for almost 50 years now. Yes, I've done that, and it can be done. But that's not what astrology is really about. That's not what it is for. Astrology exists as a science to help us speed up our evolution, to open our consciousness. So, is there a hierarchy of planets? Yes, of course there is. That's why we're having this conversation. I'm going to show you something of my opening plate here. Let me see. Well, I don't know why I can't find the diagram that I want. Let me see. I apologize to all of you for having my own difficulties with the technology, but I've got the document open, but I can't seem to get it up. Let me see.
So at the bottom of your screen, past Zoom, you may see the picture. So it may be still open at the bottom. If you just mouse over the very bottom of your screen, you might find it.
Yes, I found a whole bunch of documents open here.
And then just click on the one you want.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And then go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, I've clicked on the one that I want.
Okay, and then going back to Zoom, you want to share your screen. So
Donna, you want to share your screen and show them how?
Oh, hey Donna, just come over and show me.
I'm on my way over.
I
Transporter's warming up right now. Wonderful. Now we see it.
Okay. So here are the three categories of planets: personal, social, and transcendental. Now, the personal planets describe everything that you will experience in life, meaning everything that you either think about or see or feel or experience at any level is going to be described through these 5 personal planets. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. The sun is the ego, the inner sense of self. We all know the sun is the center of the solar system, just as the ego is the center of your personal identity. The moon is the environment. So what isn't you is the environment. So the moon is everything else. There's in India, one of the symbols for the moon is the goddess Kali. And, one of my favorite images is the goddess Kali standing at the own point, the door of creation, looking into creation, but she can't see the creator because she's facing into creation itself, which is like our moon, which is always facing the sun. But the dark side of the moon, we don't see that. Well, why this is important and what we are driving at here is that our environment is the reflection of everything that's inside of us. So the moon, the dead planet, the moon manifests. Now, what that means for us is that we are struggling always to come to terms with what we experience in our environment. And it is helpful to think with the sun and the moon and all of the planets as that there is a triangle. We experience the planet inside of us, like we talk about the sun as the ego and the moon as our feelings, our environment. But what are they based on? The external manifestation, physical sun, and the internal experience of ego are all manifestations of the sun himself. And the moon, it's the same with the moon and all of the planets. There is a triangle of energy from the planet to the external manifestation and the internal manifestation. Now, the sun and the moon are the two most basic ingredients, and that is why most people are like their sun sign. The moon is the part of us that's reaching out and always attempting to become fulfilled. Now, what role does Mercury play in the chart? Mercury creates duality. So we have subject and object. We have all of the things that we think about, all of the things that we experience come to us via Mercury. So all movement that we experience in the world, all communication, all transportation, everything comes down to our experience of what goes on with Mercury. You and have no hearing, sight, sound, touch, taste, all of which are ruled by Mercury. You have no experience of the external world. If you have no ability to think, to form an idea, it's, that is the lack of Mercury. Now, feelings are associated with Venus. Venus is the magnetic planet. Venus, the picture Venus rising on the half shell out of the ocean in Greek mythology is this Venus picture of our urge for beauty, our urge for love, our urge for synthesis coming out of the ocean. What is the ocean? The ocean represents the universal oneness. Now, Mars is our desire nature, and harnessing our desire nature to something meaningful is the nature of the game. That is how the spiritual path is created, how we manage to journey home. So the personal planets, they describe everything. Well, what role does the social planets play? The social planets are the bridge between what we experience and the higher life. So Jupiter and Saturn, the two social planets, are the web of creation. They manifest things in the external world. They give a container to our experience. Now, I found it fascinating. Jupiter appears in every culture under a different name, and so do all of the planets for that reason. We have Thor in Greek and Nordic mythology. We have Indra in India. We have Jupiter in Italy. We have Zeus in Greece. Same being, different name. Well, what does it mean to be the king of the gods? What does it mean to be this, this bureaucrat that has everybody reporting to him and administering things? I found this very interesting. That when Michel Gauquelin did a study of the 500 plus top Nazis for looking for planetary distribution, the only planet that had an irregular distribution showing in his system as being the thing that the planet that would define the group and that was Jupiter. Well, you know, so many astrologers would have thought, well, it's got to be Pluto because, you know, Pluto was discovered in 1930 when the fascists were coming to power and all of that. No, but Jupiter is God. And you remember that when Hitler was coming to power, 1933, 34, 35, by the time we got to 1940, people in Germany were not praying for Hitler. They were praying to him. They had taken him as a god. Now, this happens anytime that we have a cult or some, attribution of divine qualities to the mere shell, the mere, external form. But Jupiter has a higher function. Jupiter is our dharma. It is our essence. And when we unfold Jupiter in itself, we come to some higher connection. In India, it is referred to often as the planet of the guru, your spiritual teacher. Now, it is important. We think of it in psychological terms as it's the planet of enthusiasm. It's the planet that gives us optimism, a belief in ourselves. And then we have Saturn, which is the planet of pessimism, the planet of duty, of restriction. And in other talks, I've mentioned that the intersecting lines of time and space, time being Saturn and space being Jupiter, creates the web of creation that we experience. And, they're in this 20-year pattern of expansion for 10 years and contraction for 10 years. And then a new 20-year cycle begins. And we've discussed it in detail in other talks. But my point is that in order to progress in consciousness, in order to raise our awareness in life, we need to come to terms with, our own inner essence and the tasks that we must perform in life. So Saturn is the lord of karma, the things that we must do, and Jupiter is the planet of our essence, the dharma, our mission in life. And as Krishna says to Arjuna on the battlefield, it's better to do your own dharma poorly than somebody else as well. So learning what purpose you have in life and manifesting that is extremely important. And just like when the sun and the moon are in harmony in your chart, it makes the path in life easier because there's a balance between basic components of your personality. It's the same with Jupiter and Saturn. When your dharma and your karma balance, when your essence matches what tasks you've been given to perform in that life, the path is much easier. And just like with the sun and moon, when they're square each other, or if you're born at the time of the full moon, when they oppose each other, there is a struggle to come to terms with those two components of yourself. And it's the same with Jupiter and Saturn. The path forward is much more difficult when they conflict with each other. Now, I have something else that I wanted to show you here. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Let me go back to Zoom. And now let me see if I can share this here. Share. Now, if you notice, this diagram was taken from the book, The Zodiac Life Epitome by Walter Sampson, written in 1929. And it's simply the best book on the zodiac that I'm aware of that was ever written. I wrote a book review a number of years ago, and people have liked it. Anyway, Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, Mercury rules Gemini, the moon rules Cancer. These are considered the 4 elemental signs, the building blocks of life, the 4 hermetic elements. They are the cement that holds creation together, and that's why they're called elemental. Now, the individual signs describe all of the experience that we have in life, that from birth in Leo to death in Scorpio. So these 4 signs are where the human kingdom experiences life. Now, what about the universal signs? We have Jupiter ruling Sagittarius and Pisces, and we have Saturn ruling Capricorn and Aquarius. Now, the Jupiter and Saturn ruling these universal principles that create the envelope in which our experiences is encapsulated. This is a very big deal, but you can understand going back, what would we say, thousands of years. It's a pretty well-ordered system. Now, what happens when the outer planets are discovered? We have something amazing happen. I'm going to put a different chart up here. I'm going to show you something. Hopefully, I'm going to show you this. Let me see. So here is an outline, the discovery of the outer planets. This happened between 1781 and 1930. You have to think of all the ways that the world changed in a short amount of time. So what was the divine thinking? Why do we have this? This, what would we call an exponential speed up in evolution on the planet. With the discovery of Uranus in 1781. By the way, the exact time for the discovery of these planets was from the book, The Discovery of the Outer Planets, which I'm not 100% certain is reliable. I've seen other times of day. Everybody that I know of agrees on the day for the planet's discovery, but the times get a little wonky from one source to another. Anyway, what was happening at the time that Uranus was discovered? Well, we had the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Okay, we know these things, but what did that mean in terms of human consciousness? We were opening up. Something new was happening for us. The whole idea that, and again, Uranus is the planet of revolution, the planet of like a gigantic change, like lightning bolt type of change. So what did this do? It ushered in for us a time of immense opening up to the possibility. Remember, the Declaration of Independence has in the wording, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. Well, most of the signers of the Declaration of Independence owned slaves. Weren't they people? Well, how about women? You know, it's like we've declared something that we were not manifesting. But we strive here in America to have a more perfect union. We are continually on a path of self-improvement. We can talk more about this a little bit later, but the point is, when Neptune was discovered, the idea of having political equality, that all men and hopefully women, all human beings, all sentient beings are created equal. That's a useful concept and has been a guiding light. It wasn't until after the Civil War that the enslaved population of Black people could participate in that. And it wasn't until 1920 that women had the right to vote, and so on. But what happened with the discovery of Neptune in 1846? Well, we had this was a time of utopian socialism. This was a time of the Communist Manifesto. This was a time of people preparing to reach out for what would we call economic equality. You know, that workers deserved a fair share. I think it's very fascinating that, you know, we're having this conversation right now when the workers at the three big automakers have just gone on strike here, this is continuing struggle. And who's to say what's equal? You know, just like Uranus has a dark side, has negative manifestations. Just because you have the right to your own opinion and you have the right to speak your truth, that doesn't mean, as the proverbial expression goes, you don't have the right to stand up in a theater and shout fire. You know, that endangers other people. And just because we have the idea of economic democracy, you know, flattening it out, who's to say? Is everybody in the country, everybody everywhere in the world supposed to earn exactly the same amount of money, have exactly the same amount of food, exactly the same amount of basic necessities in life? No, that avoids the issue. The message of Neptune is compassion, is culture, is the creation of beauty, the creation of the bond between people, and it's an assertion of this higher truth. So yes, we had, you know, the positive side of when Neptune was discovered, which is, you know, people took an interest in things unseen. You know, that they had the spiritualist movement and people started talking to dead people and stuff. It was like, okay, that's fine. But there was a higher purpose behind all of this, is to awaken us, to remind us of who we really are and why we're really here. It's like it, you know, is in the song by Tom Thorne, "What Have You Done to Lift Somebody Up," came out a few years ago. There's a line in it that says, you can't be rich if your neighbors are poor. Well, yeah, if everybody is suffering, and you're not, well, maybe there's time for you to roll up your sleeves and get involved. As I have told my students many times, if you're in southern India and there's a famine going on, but you own a silo of corn, you should share it. You have a duty, a responsibility, but you should have that inner feeling of I need to get out and share what I have with others. Okay. So we had this unfoldment of Uranus and then Neptune. And then in 1930, when Pluto was discovered, it's the psychoanalytic movement took off. Well, okay, what was that about? This journey into self. Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, is a planet of life and death. It doesn't just kill, it gives birth to something. It is biological in that sense. It's like something new emerges from it. And of course, at the time of its discovery, we had fascism coming into rulership in Europe. There was also something very interesting. The First World War, we call it the First World War, but it really didn't extend to the East. I mean, yes, we had the Middle East involved, and the Turkish Empire, and all of that, and Italy and the Austrians and such. But it wasn't until Pluto was discovered, we had the Second World War, that we literally had a world war. We had Japan as well as Germany and Italy all involved in this band of maniacal taking over the world issue going on. But what happened? What broke it up? Well, we had something new going on, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. I want to mention that when the outer planets, the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto conjunct each other, that must be something very big, because it doesn't happen very often. And just like when they were discovered, something new happened. When they meet each other, something new happens. I want to show you something else here that I think is important. Let me see if I can find it. I know it's here somewhere. Excuse me just a second. I've lost it. Okay. Okay. Now here's the outer planet conjunctions. Planetary cycles. What time is it? As I've said in other talks, the modern world began with the birth of Buddha in 576 BC. By the way, and I can show you this chart and different charts that I've used for the birth of Buddha, all of which happened around the time of the triple conjunction of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. What that was bringing to the world was a new sense of what it meant to be human. And, we had the beginning of psychology and the whole technical revolution and the whole idea of individual selfhood, which took place at this time, which is something that's worth exploring, but we don't need to do it right now. What we do need to talk about, though, is the conjunction of Neptune and Pluto, which happens every 492, 93 years. The last time it happened was in 1892 to 94. And that was really, really significant, because in a handful of years, I'm right there within 4 or 5 years, we had the telegraph, the telephone, the radio, airplanes, the automobile. My grandmother was born in 1881 on a family plantation in the Old South. And they didn't have plumbing or electricity or anything. And in that short period of her life, she saw all of these things manifest many times over. And this conjunction took place in the sign Gemini. And that Gemini, of course, is the sign of thinking, the sign of movement, the sign of mind. And this taking off was extremely important. It was a very, very big deal, and it laid the foundation for what we experience today, now. Now, in 1965, 66, we had the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. By the way, when we had the conjunction of Neptune and Pluto, Pluto hadn't been discovered yet. And the discovery brings something forward into the collective consciousness. Doesn't mean that it wasn't there before and didn't have an impact, just wasn't conscious. It wasn't part of the collective in that sense. But now with Uranus and Pluto conjuncting in the middle of the 60s, there was a conscious effort to bring about this explosion, this desire for freedom. And it happened, and it affected everybody. Now, I assume that many of you in this talk here today weren't alive at the time, or if you were very young. But I grew up I was in high school at the time, and I wasn't an astrologer, but I had this immense feeling of breaking free, which all of my friends, everybody around me also had. This was a very, very important time, and we can go back and point to a number of things that happened during that handful of years that changed the orientation of the culture that we live in. And Steven Pinker, the head of the psychology department at big university in Boston, God bless. My memory isn't quite what it used to be, and I apologize for that. Oh, it was Harvard, that's right. But he wrote a number of books, this massive encyclopedic work called The Better Angels of Our Nature, basically showing that the world has been getting less violent and better as history has gone on collectively. The Better Angels of Our Nature is a work, an 800-page book, but it's totally worth the time. And let me see, Bill Gates said if he could give one book to everybody in the United States, it would be that book. Well, guess what, Mr. Gates? You could give that book to everybody in the United States if you really wanted to. So the point is, in this book, I'm quoting Steve Pinker, says, after 1965, the opposition to civil rights was moribund. Anti-Black riots were a distant memory, and terrorism against Blacks no longer received support from any significant community. Well, he isn't an astrologer. Isn't it interesting that he would come up with this? And again, I find, and he is a self-proclaimed Jewish atheist, but I point out to you that when you read books on what's going on in the world and people, reporting on different movements socially, it's amazing how accurate they are when the person has no access consciously to the astrological backdrop. Well, okay, so we had this going on in 1965, 66, and then it carried on, for a number of years, and again, there's lots of literature on this, as you all know. But I wanted to point out that as the planets separate and we get to, the semi-square, the square, the opposition, the closing square, with any of these big movements, something happens that is relevant to the manifestation of their conjunction. And the semi-square that happened between Pluto and Uranus in 1989, we had the Berlin Wall coming down. We had the Soviet Union dissolved. We had the Tiananmen Square massacre. There's a whole series of cultural things took off right at this moment. And it is important because it points back to the promise that was present at the time of the conjunction. There's a book, massive work that has come out to describe this time period. And if you go exploring it, you'll find that we as a culture took a step forward. Now, if you're like me, and all of you in this case are probably like me, that things don't happen fast enough. We want the change to be more instantaneous. But I point out to you and to myself that things have actually been coming along at a pretty rapid clip. Now, the square that took place between Uranus and Pluto occurred between 2012 and 2015. And I ask each of you to go back and look at what was going on in your life at this time. Because even if it wasn't hitting anything personal in your chart, you were affected by things that were happening, not just in the larger culture, but in your own personal life. There's a book Noel Till edited years ago called Personalizing the Outer Planets. And there's a collection of essays, collection of articles in the book. And he, in the introduction, took the chart of Mozart and showed the chart without the outer planets and described his life. And then he shows the chart with the outer planets and showing what things were happening in his life that mirrored the positions of the outer planets in his chart. And by the same token, we each have these things going on in our chart all the time, but this was a really seminal moment. Now, just as a handful of things that happened at this time, remember Pope Francis was elected at this time, and the Catholic Church took a much more progressive turn. One thing that in my research I showed up I didn't know was that the Catholic Church is not 100% homogenous. There's a section of the Catholic Church called the Eastern Diaspora, which is about 13 to 17 million people that have their own rites and rituals that are still under the Vatican. But they were, at this time, the priests were given the right to marry, which I think is a huge step in the right direction. Like with the Anglican Church, the priests have the right to marry, and the Anglican Church has women as priests as well. This whole male-female coming together aspect was very important at this time. Barack Obama was the first president to recognize and openly support gay marriage. And several states during this time legalized gay marriage. It was a while coming before it was become a large scale aspect of our society, but it was nonetheless, it was there. Now, it was also, it's kind of important. Again, I'm not gay. I'm not wanting to marry a man, but it is important that I want people to have the right to do that. Again, this is Uranus wanting to grant freedom to everybody else for things that we ourselves wouldn't necessarily do, but we want to give other people the right to do it. Just like I don't want anybody to get an abortion, but I want everybody to have the right to get one. And then it's the right of the individual, which was this stepping forward of the Uranus principle. And again, Pluto being life and death, its existence, it's giving something the right to exist. And this was the during this time period, recreational marijuana became legal in some states for the first time. I mean, it's many more now, but think of it. It wasn't just that you could go and get a prescription for marijuana and treat some medical issue, but you could go and get it just to have a good time. Oh, I want to get high. All right, well, I'm a child of the 60s, but since 1970, 71, I haven't done any illegal drugs. I haven't done any. As a matter of fact, I only, under great inducement, take any medication at all, only if my doctor demands it, because my spiritual master told me that marijuana, LSD, all of the other psychedelic drugs interfered with your spiritual development. And he's my master. Of course, he's right. So I quit. But I'm saying the Uranus person in me wants everybody to be able to do that. I trust that each person can make the best decisions for their own life. And, it's the secret is that every human being is a universe, and they have a right to their own autonomy as they're working out their dharma. Anyway, also Belgium during this time period became the first country to legalize euthanasia. Well, I'm not planning on killing myself, and I don't think that people should kill themselves for the most part. But for people to have the right to take their own life is probably a step up. It's a good thing. Now, during this time, Puerto Rico voted to become a state. Well, guess what? They're still waiting, but they took the vote, and that was important. Also, it was during this time period that mobile devices overtook desktops as being a way to access the internet. So it was an explosion at this time of our ability to communicate with each other and to carry out business and all of the social things that we do in a fairly universal way. And you can go to some of the poorest countries in Africa and find people that have access to the internet through their cell phone. And this was a really important step. But there was something, I think, massively important that happened during this time period, which was in February 22nd, 2014, the Ukrainian parliament kicked out the Russian puppet that was ostensibly their president. And he went crying back to Russia, but then, 8 years later, Russia invaded. Now, after they kicked out the Russian puppet, Russia did steal Crimea and southern Ukraine. But, we live in the midst of this ongoing struggle now. So what happened in 1993? We had the Neptune-Uranus conjunction. Now, the last time that Neptune and Uranus conjuncted was in 1821, which was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And it was a taking wings of new ways of doing things and new economic models being developed. So what happened in 1993? Well, as an astrologer, I saw this conjunction happening all through the year of 1993. And I sent, in 1992, I sent an email. See, we've become so addicted to it. I sent a physical letter to 278 regular clients of mine, telling what was going to happen in 1993 and how to prepare for it. And I'm saying, we're going to be doing business in a different way. Communications are going to be instantaneous. Business models are going to change. We're going into the post modern world, and on. I had predicted that the housing market would top in the year 2006. I was a couple years off, but I had the category right. The point is that I was looking at the newspaper every day. Look, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And then there was an article that this computer professional Barksdale at the University of Illinois had come up with a web browser that was going to make the World Wide Web accessible to everybody. And I says, oh my God, this is it. And that was when the internet, of course, took off. And we have the world that we live in today. So let me see. Oh, yeah, I think it's important to remember that, the Marshall McLuhan, one of my heroes, had talked about in his book on media that, the clothes are an extension of the skin, the wheel is an extension of the foot, and so on, about human being and their extensions. And it occurred to me that the internet is an extension of the world mind. We have moved in to this time period where there's something that electricity brings to life that hasn't happened before. Now I want to, again, so much here. I want to talk a little bit about there's a concept that gets kicked around a lot. That's called the planets as higher octaves. So I want to just spend a moment on this here. Okay. This is the idea behind the idea of a planet being a higher octave. Mercury has Uranus as a higher octave. Venus has Neptune as a higher octave. Mars has Pluto as its higher octave. The three transcendental planets as mirroring some aspect of the planets that we experience as personal, as our individual selves. But I wanted to point out that there is a difference between wind Mercury, and a hurricane, Uranus. And there's a difference between Venus as the planet of love and Neptune as the planet of compassion, faith. There's a difference between fire, which is Mars, and a volcano, which is Pluto. They sound like it's just a matter of degrees, but when you get to a certain point in the degree, you cross over into some new dimension. And I'm speaking of this because the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are three divine attributes: infinite knowledge, Uranus; infinite bliss, Neptune; infinite power, Pluto. Now, if the planets were only transcendental, standing outside creation, they wouldn't be infinite. They're infinite because they are manifest and unmanifest. They happen at all levels of creation. And it is important to think of Uranus as that which carries us beyond thought. It carries us into the realm of intuition. I have a daughter who had she has no air in her chart. And people with no air in their chart are like, they don't have an intermediate thought process. It's instantaneous. And I was trying to help her with some advanced math in her school. And she could not do the intermediate steps, but we'd be sitting at the table for hours sometimes. And I would try to explain the steps to her, and she says, well, I guess it was a calculus problem. And I says, you got to do this and this and this. And she says, well, is the answer 42? And I said, well, yes. How did you get there? She says, I don't know. And that is Uranus. Well, Venus, the planet of love, okay, I feel this great love for this person. It's personal. I love Mary. I love Tom. But what is it when we have this great gushing forward, this outpouring for humanity, for all creatures, for everything in creation? We've talked about Neptune as being sometimes associated with Christianity. Well, think of the world before Christianity and what Christianity's brought. Christianity is responsible for this reaching out of hospitals and goodwill industry and all of the kinds of things that are meant to uplift people and to help people. It's this compassionate sharing and this generalized experience of love for the world is different than Venusian. It's different than I love so-and-so, or I'm really fond of Oreo cookies. I have love for, the math class in school. It breaks beyond the shell of the personal into this gigantic impersonal arena. And Pluto isn't just, oh, you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. Pluto is just that you hit me, I'm going to drop an atomic bomb on your head. It's like this tremendous destruction. Also, Mars is destructive, but Pluto isn't just destructive, because Pluto, the planet of life and death, brings completion. And out of the death, there is a phoenix. There is something new. When you're in Hawaii and you look at land that's been covered with lava, and after the lava hardens and dries, there are these little red beads that come up. It's the first growth that starts coming out of the lava. It's a new life. And it and where the lava has flowed in Hawaii is called an altar. sacred ground. And it's because people, talk about, well, you shouldn't take anything away from Hawaii, you'll have bad luck. And there's all kinds of, like you go to the museum and there's all kinds of things that people have taken and sent back because they fell in bad luck. And I was, in a seminar where I was hired to do the astrology for these people that were on a, oh God, what was it, a 11, 12-day vision quest. It's kind of very exciting. It was right at the time that Pluto was going out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius. And the person who was running the retreat said, somebody asked, well, we shouldn't take any of this with us. And the person looked disgusted and says, you can take it, but you have to ask. In other words, you ask Pele if it's all right to take it and to be open and listen. And it's the same kind of thing with the planets. You have to be willing to be open and listen to what they have to say. So what do I have to say on this here? I want to, again, instead of carrying us through a litany of things that we would, let me see if I can find this. I got something else that I want to show you here, and I gotta find it now. Oh, okay. Oh boy. Okay, I'm going back to Zoom and I'm going to screen share with this. Pray for me that if I ever do more of these talks for anybody, that I get better at this technical stuff. Anyhow, this is the chart of Sri Aurobindo, and he was born in 1872, 5 in the morning. The birth time is considered by Lois Roden's system was considered a B chart, and Marion March got this out of a book that had it at 5 a.m. Anyhow, so here was the chart of Sri Aurobindo. Okay, he's Leo, moon in Sagittarius, Leo rising. Very, very powerful chart. He was raised by his father to go into the British civil service. And he was sent to England, he got his education there, and he came back to India and didn't actually end up going into the civil service. Instead, he became a revolutionary. And he was held in prison twice for about a year, but he managed to be found innocent, or the case is dismissed. And while he was in prison, he had visions and spiritual experiences, and he could hear Vivekananda, the founder of the Vedanta Society, speaking to him, and he became quite a mystic. And he moved to Pondicherry in southern India, which was protectorate of the French, and he managed to escape the British at the time, and he ended up becoming a spiritual leader and having followers, and starting a city called Oroville, city of the future. And his main picture was that you could become enlightened in your physical form, and that we as human beings were evolving. We were becoming something new. And I thought his chart to be very interesting on this case. He spoke 12 languages, or he was fluent in 12 different languages. He was very scholarly, and he was educated in the West, but he was an Indian at the soul level. Now, your Neptune, which is the planet of infinite bliss, is closely trying the moon, showing his connection with the planet, with the path of bhakti yoga, or the path of bliss, the yoga of love. And his sun fulfills the grand trine here. Now, grand trine, as you know, is a very, very powerful formation. But if there's no hard aspect to a grand trine, often the individual ends up being in this tight circle of self-satisfaction. But he has a trigger in this pattern from Mars in Cancer. Now, this is, of course, very important because Mars is the planet of desire. And the position of the Mars in your horoscope shows what the determining mental impression was that brought you back into evolution on the planet. Well, for him, Mars is in Cancer. It is the sign of its detriment. But people with Mars in Cancer have a desire to belong, to be part of a family. Mars is not particularly happy in Cancer. And in the 12th house, Mars in Cancer in the 12th house, there is, a pulling away from the very thing that you want. Well, anytime Mars, and here we have a distant, 5-degree aspect of Mars to Uranus. Anybody born with Mars conjunct Uranus had the desire to raise the vibration of their Mars. And he had, of course, this overwhelming urge to make something new happen, to make something higher come about. And in the 12th house, of course, the 12th house can mean being in prison or being tightly confined. And he was, of course, twice in his life jailed for a year. But in addition to that, he started an ashram, which is also a 12th house phenomenon. And in the mid-20s, he went into basically retirement or seclusion, and he lived for another 24 years with his co-worker, Mother Mira, that she was referred to, the mother, who he said was his co-thinker. She ran everything, and he lived out his life in retirement. He wrote assiduously. He wrote many, many volumes. I think that this is fascinating, and the reason that I was using his chart is Neptune is associated with mysticism, and Pluto is more connected with technology. So Neptune is more naturally connected to the east, and Pluto is more naturally connected to the west. But after Pluto was discovered, the spiritual connection between east and west merged, so that you have the same, members of the spiritual hierarchy, spiritual masters for the east and the west were the same. And, there was this great blending. Well, Pluto in his chart is trine Mercury and Saturn, which puts him clearly in this cycle of self-sufficiency with Earth, this closed circuit of Pluto, Saturn, and Mercury, which is extremely scholarly. And Mercury, of course, being in Virgo, and Venus, the planet of love and beauty, being in Virgo, he wanted things to be well organized. He did amazing amount of, as I say, writing. Well, Venus rules his third house, which is writing, and is in the first house in Virgo. And Mars rules the ninth house where Neptune is, and this is a sign of publishing. And he really did not have any problem getting his writings out in the early days in but in the early part of the 20th century. He was always harassed by the British government for what they called his sedition, his writing about in India gaining its independence. And he gave up all violence at some point and devoted his life to the spiritual path. So I thought that this was interesting. Now, I had a couple of other things I wanted to share with you, and I will make this brief. Let me see. I gotta end sharing here first, don't I? Okay. Right now we are in the time of Saturn in Pisces. And I thought that this was kind of a fascinating picture, because what does Saturn in Pisces mean? Now, remember, when we talk about Jupiter and Saturn, we're talking about the mechanisms that materialize the outer planets and make them available for the personal planets. So we have Saturn in Pisces here, and here's the times that it was in Pisces earlier on. It was in March to September of 64, then December of 64 to March of 67. Well, that was the time of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Now, what's the meaning of Saturn? Saturn is structure. It's our bones, our skin, our teeth, and our physical body. Saturn establishes hierarchy on its own. Well, what does it mean in Pisces? Well, Pisces is the sign of dreams, of illusions, of being escapist. And Saturn wants to, either pop the bubble or make it practical. It materializes something in our dream mechanism, or it eliminates it. And we went through this time period with Saturn in Pisces at the time of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and we also went through it at the time of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in 93 and on up into to 1996. Well, again, this is just pulling down to earth, making things practical, and taking what is in our, like our mystical vision of a better life, and saying, oh, that's just escapism, get rid of it. And for many people during this time, the time that we're in now, March to May, is a time of 2.5 year period here, March of 2023 to May of 2025. This time period of people being a little glum, a little depressed. Saturn rules negative thinking. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess all of these things that I would wish isn't going to happen. But This is good because it allows us to clear the deck. And that's what Saturn's job is. If you have the oh the December of 2020 to January of 2021 Mountain Astrologer, there was an article by E. Allen Meese called Time for Reform Again. And this article came out 30 years after he had written a similar article in Mountain Astrologer about what happens when Jupiter and Saturn are in proximity of each other in the sign Aquarius. And he talks about Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, and then in Pisces, and what that means. This is it's a fascinating read, and he's a really brilliant astrologer. And I mentioned that if you have access to this article, you would find it to be really good. He shows every 60 years when when Saturn is in Aquarius with Jupiter, that we go through a cycle of reforming. Well, obviously we're in that period now. And he talks about the functioning of Saturn in Pisces in that article some, and he gives a much, what would we say, brighter spin on it than some other writers have. And as all astrologers, we can suffer from, what would you say, wishful thinking. We try to make the planets mean what we will want them to mean, instead of being strictly analytic and just looking at them and saying, well, here's what they obviously mean. It takes a great amount of detachment to do astrology well. As my spiritual master Meher Baba said, astrology is the perfect science. Out of 1 million astrologers, one understands it. And he also said, astrology has to be interpreted in the culture that it arises in. And I took that for me to mean that I want to be a Western astrologer practicing an astrology that's mainstream in the United States, which has not always been easy. You know, we end up getting into lots of controversies. And as your own here in San Diego, Kenneth Miller said, he wrote an article called The Problem of the Three Zodiac. He called it the Three Zodiac Problems. It was in ESAR Journal in 2018. And it tickled my funny bone so much when I read it. When I was getting ready for this talk, I actually wrote him and says, hey, could I have a copy of that article? I thought it was so fantastic. And he kindly sent it to me. And I recommend all of you, if you would have access to getting a copy. It's a fun read because it's not only scholarly, like he is a scholar, but it's easy to understand how it isn't like we have, you know, the tropical zodiac is it, and the Vedic astrology, Vedic zodiac is not. He says, well, we have the Vedic zodiac, but we also have the zodiac of constellations, and he shows how there's meaning in that as well. And it is so important that we remain tolerant of people who understand things that we don't understand, and to not be dismissive of it, make light of it. Let me see. I'm going to just show quickly what I see as coming up, and that is important. I'm going to see if I can get it here. All righty. All right, screen share. All right, this is my take on the important things coming up. And remember, as I have just been talking about Saturn and Pisces, which was, empowering and important. Pluto going into Aquarius is important. Now, we had the first taste of this in March of this year. Pluto in Aquarius is empowering because in 0 degrees Aquarius was the position that Jupiter and Saturn started their cycle on. That's the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn back a couple of years ago here now in December of 2020. So, and Pluto is back in Capricorn now, and will be until 2024. Goes into Aquarius in January. But what does this period mean right now? Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that Pluto right now is squaring the eclipse point of the May eclipse this year at 29 degrees of Aries. And it is telling us, okay, we have some things to deal with that happen because of, or shown by Pluto making its transition through Capricorn. This was a very, very limiting cycle. Pluto and Capricorn, when it was there last, we had the American Revolution, and we had the the toppling of monarchies. We had a new, again, Capricorn is hierarchical by nature, and it's like we're pushing over the tower of how bureaucracy is managed, starting from the top down, breaking the pattern. Well, it's interesting as well that Uranus, the planet of intuition, has been in its fall, the fall of Uranus and Taurus. Every time that Uranus is there, we have sort of a smushing down of this influence. And of course, it was there during the Dust Bowl in its last passage. But in the Uranus is the planet of freedom, and when it was in Taurus before, we had the rise of dictators all over the world, which sounds familiar. We have these, like dictatorships in all over the world, and in the United States, you have people who want to follow somebody regardless of what they do. They want to not think about it, just have a dictator and in power to make all of their decisions for them. Well, Uranus will go out of Taurus, and when it does, we will have Uranus in Gemini. Every time Uranus has been in Gemini, the United States has been at war. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, Second World War, what we have, and we will have that going into effect as Uranus moves into Gemini in November of 2025, and then permanently in April of 2026, which will, set the groundwork for something new to happen. And this time, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto will be forming a sextile fan, meaning that Uranus and Gemini, Neptune and Aries and Pluto and Aquarius will be in 60 degrees apart of each other and being massively supportive. Remember, a sextile aspect is alchemical. It blends two things together that are not similar and creates a third. Something new emerges from it. For better or worse, Mark Edmund Jones says, take the closest sextile in your chart, and that tells you your purpose in life. This sextile, basically, I'm saying the summer of 2027, but we'll see the effect in 2026. In the summer of 2026, we'll start seeing the effect of this, and we'll be moving into a new period of creation, new world. So I know we could go on. I want to just mention one other thing. In March 30th, 2025, Neptune goes into Aries, and Neptune and Aries, and Aries is violent. It is initiative. It's impulsive. It was interesting. If you read Stan Barker's book, The Sign of the Times, he talks about Neptune through the different signs of the zodiac, and he mentions that the Civil War started, with the General McClellan being in charge of the Union Army with Neptune in Pisces, but was replaced. And when Neptune went into Aries, and then we had actual fighting breaking out, and there's the attack on Fort Sumter, and the war got hot, and the journey of Neptune through Aries will be exciting, and I have high hopes for it. I don't consider it to be a bad symbol. Now, I know that people will ask me, predictively, who's going to win the election, for president, who's going to win, the House of Representatives or the Senate, all around the world, what's going to happen in these various places. I ask you to think on this yourself. I will tell you, I predicted that Joe Biden would win the last election because I saw the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, and thought, now who's going to be able to carry us into a progressive pattern in this next period? And it was like, it was pretty dead bang easy. When Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, I had so many friends that were making fun of him. It's like, it's a clown. And I have one of my close friends as a higher functionary in the Republican Party. And I pulled her aside and I said, don't make light of this. His chart is like a wrecking ball. He's going to run through people like crazy. He will not be stopped. And of course, that was what happened. Now, I don't consider myself to be a great prognosticator, and I don't put a lot of emphasis in my own work on this type of thing. I only mention it in passing because everybody wants to know, well, what's going to happen? I wanted to leave you with this message. It isn't what's going to happen in our culture that's important. It's what's going to happen to you individually. And I don't mean in terms of, are you going to live or die? Guess what? You're going to die. Everybody does. Not whether, are you going to get a better job? Are you going to, is your marriage partner going to recover from an illness? Or, it's like, all of this is part and parcel of what we live with. and we think about, and we burden ourselves with worry at times. But I'm telling you, what's really important is what can you do to help your fellow human beings? What can you do to brighten your own spirit, to elevate you, to bring you to a higher point in your own evolutionary journey? Anyway, I'm going to end here because I've gone on for a while here, beyond what I think is probably good. But you're welcome to ask me questions if you have anything that is on your mind about anything that's pertinent to the subject matter. Please let me know.
Well, that was really wonderful. Thank you. If anyone wants to unmute to ask questions now, that would be good. But I'm going to start with the questions. So you talked about the three planets coming together in 1890. That was Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And now we're seeing that again.
Excuse me. 1892 and 93 was Neptune and Pluto.
Mhm.
Those two.
Oh, just no Uranus. So now with the three coming together in the sextile fan, and taking it from an individual standpoint, what do you think is the good things that we can do as individuals to utilize that sextile fan?
Well, yeah, of course, it'll be individual with each person. But the most important thing is to remember, is something that my master Meher Baba said. When you help another person, God hears it and is instantly pleased. And no amount of prayer or fasting can do what helping another person can do for your own evolution. I'm saying that that's generic, but that having been said, is each of you, all of us suffer a little bit from thinking, well, I don't know enough. I can't really help, anybody with blah, blah, blah. I'm saying there isn't a single person here that cannot help somebody with their astrological knowledge, even if you feel it is extremely thin. I don't mean that you should necessarily be a professional astrologer or whatever, but you can use just whatever astrological things that can be of help. A simple thing like when I was in high school, my therapist said to me and we were in the middle of a snowstorm, I said, you want me to go out and start shoveling your walks? And he said, God can snow harder than you can shovel. And I thought, yeah, that's absolutely right. And I'm saying for us as astrologers, knowing, yeah, when the time is right, timing matters. And our timing doesn't have to be perfect, but to not let the golden moment slip by when you can see something that you can do to make your life or somebody's life better. And what is the hackneyed expression? He who hesitates is lost. You see it, jump on board. Neptune in Aries gives a green light to being first at line at the restaurant and getting your table. With Pluto at the time in Aquarius, it is, forging new pathways, taking up new studies, doing things that improve your life, the life on the planet, doing something that is improvement for everybody. And with Gemini being the house of a housing Uranus at that point, we are enlivened to take up the study of a battery of new things. What you want, I'm gonna make this real personal for you. When you are thinking, you know what, I'm gonna go study, French literature. Or, I want to get the Chilton's repair manual for the TR3. It's like, when you get those thoughts, if you feel your heart being thrown up in the air like a gyroscope on a string, you're on the right track. If you feel confused or like, oh my God, I really must do this, if you're shooting on yourself, you're off on the wrong foot. So it has to be something where there is this feeling. Now, again, this sextile fan doesn't take off for a couple of years, but we will see preliminary markings in the sand, so to speak, over the next few years. But during this period, with Pluto in retrograde back in Capricorn, it's hard to move on. It's like your swimming instructor says, I saw you swim the entire length of that pool very rapidly. Now I want you to put on these galoshes and do the same thing that you just did. You're thinking, what? It's like, I got to do what? And it's like, okay, I can do this. And I'm saying it's like, when you realize, all right, this isn't just building stronger leg muscles. I'm actually cleaning up something that was left to be done. Pluto as a planet, when you're dealing with a Pluto transit, you work and work and work and work, and you go, oh my God, I'm so glad that that's done. God, it was hard, but I did it. And then a few months later, you go, what? It came back. I'm dealing with the same thing again. And it's like, oh my God, it's easy. It's very easy during this period, all the way up until the beginning of 2024, to lose heart, to give up and think, oh, I can't do it. But to the wise, that there's certain things that you must do, whether you want to or not. And I'm saying, put on your glad face. It's like, hey, thank you. I'm going to do this. And I know that it is mine to do. It's not whether I want it or not. It's sort of like, for me, it was like this talk appeared out of nowhere. And it was like, all right, I knew it was mine. I had to do it. So instead of being pissy about it, like, oh my God, it's like, I got happy about it and threw myself into it. And that's the key here, is just to be able to throw yourself into what you are given to do. And if you are able to do that, I was listening to this mother being interviewed. She has a 15-year-old son, and she's an immigrant. She came here from Honduras with their son, who was very small at the time. And she says, as we were going over these 1,200-mile journey on foot with no water, no food, no money, and we made it to the United States. He said, he, as a small child, he always was happy. He always had a smile on his face. And she says, it cheered the rest of us up. And to recognize that you can do something with your astrological knowledge to brighten other people, but also to make your own path easier. So this sextile fan, I'm not 100% positive on this, but I haven't found a configuration like this for the last 2,500 years, where the three outer planets were working together like this. I'm 100% positive it hasn't happened since 1881, since the discovery of Uranus. And as I've been trying to say, the discovery of these outer planets brought them collectively into our consciousness. It's like even in fledgling democracies, like in Athens, in back in 400 BC, if somebody had stood up and said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal," people would think, "What are you, nuts?" It's like it wasn't the time. It's sort of like, it starts with the thought process. Somebody invented an airplane. The Wright brothers took off in, what was it, 1904, with the first airplane flight. Well, people had had the idea, Mercury, for thousands of years. They've been thinking about flying, but culturally, it wasn't the right time.
Right. Da Vinci drew those pictures, right?
Yes. But I'm trying to, yeah, that's a very important point. It's like the ideas were there, but we hadn't been able to cross over because the culture didn't support it yet. And that's why I'm saying is like, for these ideas to take root, they have to come down through the different planes of consciousness to materialize in the gross world. And it's an intricate dance between these three outer planets and the social planets, Jupiter and Saturn, that, as I say, materialize these outer aspects. But I'm saying the discovery of Uranus and Neptune were necessary in order for the cultural context to externalize and take root that would allow the airplane to come into its own. I mean, and you can do this with everything. It's like, oh, we had do you know that in ancient Greece they had steam-powered engines?
Oh,
they were only used for children's toys. They were a novelty. Seriously, they were a novelty. Why? Because there wasn't the backdrop that that made them a labor-saving device. They had slaves for that. They didn't need steam engines. I'm pointing, and it's a complex picture that you get, that things happen at the time that they're supposed to happen. But you raise a really important question, and I wish I could give a little bit more of a definitive answer to you on this. What does it mean, this sextile fan coming to us? And I'm saying you will start, each one of us will experience it a little bit in 2026, but we'll experience other aspects of this year, and next year, and the year after. Inch by inch, we are growing towards something that's cosmically different than anything that we've ever experienced before. And some friends of mine who are like UFO people call me up and say, "Hey, how about these ET characters that they have discovered in Mexico?" And it's like, and I have I'm no names, but I have a friend who's a very well-known astrologer that claims that her father came from another planet and married an Earth woman, and that he was sent here as a monitor to the culture. Okay, I don't know anything about that, but I'm not discounting it. I'm saying there's only one God, and every entity in creation is headed toward God realization. People talk about reincarnation, they talk about karma, but what's it for? It leads to something. That's the point. We reincarnate because we have to. We have to keep growing and developing in consciousness until we get to the place where we can see the illusion for what it is. And if we're in our physical body, like Sri Aurobindo, whose chart I was showing you earlier, it's like, okay, you're in your physical body, you can see creation and you can see reality. The illusion and reality are in parity with each other. And the illusion has a purpose. The purpose of the illusion is for the development of consciousness, so God could know himself. Period. That's the reason that we have, we go through this long process. Well, that was my long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you.
Question,
Leela has a question in the chat, and she wants to know the signs and degrees of the 3 outer planets when they make the sextile fan.
yes. Let me see if I can put that up again, okay?
Mhm.
Yes. Let me see. Oh boy. Let's try this here. Oh, did I do it? Am I?
Yes, I see the slide. It's
Yeah.
says,
Okay. So here we have the sextile fan. Uranus is in Gemini, Neptune is in Aries, and Pluto is in Aquarius. And as I have detailed out here a bit, you can see the time that each of these goes into those signs. Pluto into Aquarius, 2024, Neptune into Aries, 2025, and later in 2025, Uranus into Gemini. So, anything else?
Bob, this is Leela.
Hi.
My screen is stopped and stuff because my phone is just about out of memory.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Can you just tell me what the degrees are in?
It'll be at the early degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they stay in, orb with each other and in exact configuration for that, handful of years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
no more questions in the chat. Anybody can unmute if they want to say anything.
Yes, this is Lori. That was fantastic, Bob. I just put something in the chat, and that was, you were talking about Krishna. He had said that it is better to do your own dharma poorly than someone else's well. I'd never heard that before, and this is probably like a whole other lecture, and we have like 3 minutes left, but is there anything in the chart, if somebody comes to you and says, that's what I want to find, my dharma or my purpose in life is, are you looking at the nodes, or like, what are you?
Absolutely. You're asking a really important question. Remember, dharma is Jupiter, and Jupiter and Saturn have a 20-year cycle. Well, guess what? The nodes of the moon have an 18.5-year cycle. And the north node of the moon does show your dharma.
Okay.
The south node of the moon shows your karma. What's the, hanging on from the past. Yes, this is it's a long talk, but the nodal axis, north node and south node, function like the moon. The moon is, we have the future moon, which is our dharma, and the past moon, which is our karma. It's great simplification of something that's a little bit more complicated than this, but that's it in a nutshell. When somebody asks me, what's my purpose in life? Well, if it comes to me cold, meaning I don't have access to dialogue, I have to say something, obviously you're going to answer, well, what do you like to do?
Okay.
But this is a quick personalism. And, for those of you who know me for a long time, know the story. I was in graduate school and my master, Meher Baba, said, it's time for you to have a career. I said, okay, choose something. He said, no, you choose. I said, I can't. He says, well, you must be good at something. I says, I'm actually not good at anything. You know, I'm a mediocre student. He says, well, you know, what would you like to do? I says, all I want to do is to please you. He says, well, it would please me if you chose. So this went back and forth, and we had this conversation 3 nights in a row, and he finally just slapped his hand and says, okay, done. And the next night, the 22nd of November, I was carried up into a higher arena. I saw the whole universe as a mandala. And I came back into my physical body, an astrologer. And I've been doing astrology every day since that day. Now, how does that show in my chart? Well, Uranus rules astrology. I have Uranus squaring my sun and trining my my Mercury, but it's also sextile my Saturn. So we have, you know, Saturn karma, the sun self, Mercury is mind. You know, it was dead bang set up. Now, when you're trying to, it's like if you take a piano lesson and your piano teacher hits middle C and says, okay, can you do that? And you hit middle C. Well, that's like you opened a textbook and you read, what does it say about Saturn and Pisces? Okay, I got that. I memorized it. And you can hit that middle C every time the teacher says hit the middle C. But that's a long ways away from sitting down and playing Moonlight Sonata on the piano. The problem is everything's in motion all the time, and every planet has an effect on every other planet. And so you're always dealing with your own chart with a myriad of different factors that are happening simultaneously. And it is almost impossible to get a fix on what the bottom line is. I tell all of my students, you have to have at least 10 astrologers do your chart. You have to see a vast array of what, you know, the field has to offer. And, you know, I used to take, I still, every year I take something, you know, where I'm not teaching, I'm the student. And it can be a beginning astrology class, it can be a conference, but I always learn something that I didn't know. And it is worthwhile. You have to be able to stay open and to be interested. You know, it's like I was talking to one of my students who wanted to write a book. And I told them exactly what, you know, I read in the book on writing. You know, if you do not have time to read, you don't have time to write. And reading keeps you in tune with what's going on. Just lots and lots and lots of astrologers out there. I'm talking to a friend of mine, an astrologer, and I was saying, hey, I got this book and I read it. He says, oh yeah, I have that, but I haven't read it yet. I'm saying, no, you know, you have to keep your own mind fertile. You have to keep it, you know, energized. And yes, it is a daunting task. It's an impossible task, but we stay at it, and it's worthwhile every step of the way. So Krishna is talking to Arjuna on the battlefield, where Arjuna says, you know what, I don't want to kill my relatives. I don't want to be in this war. I want to become a wandering mendicant and, you know, like be an ascetic and, you know, do yoga. And Krishna takes the time to explain to him what yoga is and what it isn't. And then he says to him, you know, you're a Shastriyite, you're a warrior. This is your dharma. This is what you're meant to do. It's better to do your own dharma poorly than somebody else's well. Yeah, you could go off and do, just like everyone here in this talk, we could go and be in the 3rd grade and win all the spelling bees. But so what? That's not what we're supposed to be doing. You know, and it's not just what we have to challenge ourselves. we have certain things. And when you're doing what is right for you, this is a stretch. But just like I was saying, when Donna was asking about what to do with the sextile fan, when you feel attracted to taking up the study of something, or you get a new interest, if it doesn't make your heart sing, if it doesn't open you up, it's not the right thing. It should not be burdensome. And with this principle of Dharma for us during this time period, we have to be honest with ourselves and bury ourselves in whatever the details are of what's being offered, and to do it as to the best of our ability. And we can do this. This is what we are supposed to be doing with our life. And each one of us, whether we're playing, the piccolo or the first violin or the drums, we're in the orchestra somewhere, and we don't need to figure out how to play anybody else's instrument. What we do have to, we owe it to ourselves and to the world to perfect our own to the best of our ability, and to try and cheer everybody else up and to bring them along with the idea that, hey, they can do better and we can all get better together. We can be a team. Anybody have anything else that they want to ask?
Oh, I just have one quick question. What was the name of that book in the very beginning of your talk? You said it was like a treasured book, astrology book.
Zodiac, A Life Epitome by Walter Sampson. And, I am really negligent on this. And Donna, I apologize to you because you asked me to have printed out the information of how people could get in contact with me. And I thought, I'm an air sign. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. But I didn't. It's like, oh God. So, my email address is bobmulliga@aol.com. BOBMULLIGA@AOL.com. The Zodiac of Life Epitome is simply the Chateau Yquem 1962 of astrology books. If anybody ever finds something that beats that, they got to let me know. But I would be amazed. It's a foundational work. And Dane Ridjar, Marsha Moore and Mark Douglas. I'm trying to think. Charles Carter. So many people, not say plagiarized, but let's say lifted things from that book and put them in their own, because it's phenomenal. It really is. It is. I don't do it anymore, but I used to read it every spring because it was just uplifting and kept the Zodiac alive.
Who's the author?
Walter Sampson. And I gave you my email address because if you can't find something that I mentioned, I'm pretty good at, unless I make a mistake, I'm pretty good at answering all of my emails.
And I've put Bob's email in the chat so you can see the exact spelling.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Thank you. God help. I got to tell you, this would have been a mess today if it hadn't have been for Donna. And I'm very thankful for your diligence and friendship on this. Anybody else have any question here?
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I was looking forward to you speaking for months and months. As soon as we had you signed up, I was so excited to see you again. So thank you. Just appreciate everything that you shared with us. And if anyone is not getting his monthly email, please go to his site and sign up, because this man is just incredible. So, and if anyone has any questions, you can go to our website. There's information there about Bob. And yeah, Donna's put stuff on in the chat. But if you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know. We can help get in contact with Bob if you can't find him.
Yeah, I
Thank
have
you, Bob.
I
It
have
was
a
wonderful.
free monthly newsletter. Anybody wants it, you're more than welcome to it. I wanted to just say one thing. You know, when a planet, and you know, if you look at your chart, if you have something on a 0 degree or 29th degree, that planet is finishing up at 29 or starting at 0. It's the, you know, again, the symbolism works. And I've, you know, used it for many, many, many years. And there are lots of articles on using the 0 degree or 29th degree in this fashion. So, I mean, there's so many things that we just sort of open the door to. We didn't, you know, you can't do everything all at once, but it's been a joy. I'm happy to have been with all of you. So, thank you. Namaste. Go in peace.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Everything.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I'll be sending out this recording later today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for everybody who came.
Thank you so much.